Educating, informing, serving. Fact TV, keeping government honest.
You're watching a Fact TV presentation of the Town of Rockingham Select Board Meeting.
It is Tuesday, August 15th, 6 o'clock. We are at the Rockingham Meeting House for our annual meeting here. That being said, there is no Zoom, and we are recording on Fact TV, so you can't see anything live. So that being said, let's call the meeting to order. And the first order of business is to approve the minutes of July 18th and July 24th. We have a motion.
I move that we approve the minutes of July 18th and July 24th.
A second?
A second.
Motion made and seconded to approve the minutes of July 18th, July 24th. Any additions, corrections, deletions, omissions? There is one correction on the 18th. Minor correction. If you look at second page, item 7, it says that the BFE, Bills Files Village Corporation, received $50,000 grant and no additional funding. It should say $15,000. If you go back to the front page, $50,000 was awarded for the radio study and appropriation. So, that being said, no further corrections. Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion would say aye.
Aye.
Minutes are adopted. Additions to the agenda for routine maintenance, administrative matters, and/or pressing matters that will require ratification in a future meeting. I have none. Scott?
I'm going to pass that to you guys. Walter had an updated policy for the use of the facility and just some minor updates on how you could reserve it. So it's going to be part of his talk tonight, so I'll circulate that to the board. He'll do that as part of his presentation, as well as update you on the other grant and aspects of the capital projects, and then we'll put it on for adoption. So,
Board members? Hearing any none, we'll move down to the next item, which is the public comment on items not on the agenda. 3 minutes. Seeing none, move right on to the manager's report.
sure, I'm going to stand up here. I apologize to those of you who might be turning my back to you. It's a little awkward to present it here, but a couple of things. We're finishing up some of our structures, which is part of our paving. So the contractor who was subcontracted, it wasn't contracted through us, it was through Springfield, is Buck Adams. He's been tied up doing some flood-related damage and capital work, so he's been a little behind. We're still on schedule to get that paving completed, hopefully by the end of next week, which gives us a solid week then before school starts, so that will all be done and out of the way. The sidewalk project that we've discussed on Pine Street won't start till later on in the fall, and we still have some sidewalk paving to do with asphalt in Saxon's River, and depending upon, again, weather, and that seems to be a tricky subject this summer, when we can actually get that done. We're hoping to have that done sometime in August, so at least all of the asphalt work will be done by the end of August. We'll still, like I said, have our sidewalk work that we had awarded to be completed hopefully in September, and then we'll move on from that. On planning and zoning, we've been working with 2 other communities on a shared resource for planning and zoning administration. We have 2 folks, one that got hired through Windsor, one who's under a contract, and we're sharing hours between Windsor, Weathersfield, and Rockingham to see how that might work in terms of doing some land use planning and also helping with the zoning work that Gary's been taking on and also Betsy's been assisting with. So it's a contract, it's something we're going to try. We weren't real happy with our recruitment, and so this is an opportunity to take some pressure off and let them focus on some of their other projects, which are also time sensitive and pressing. So we will let you know as this progresses how this is working, and we will certainly take that into greater consideration as we go through the budget process and go through the fall. So that's an ongoing process that we're evaluating to see how that works. There are some things, and I think Betsy's here, so we'll hold some of that till later in your meeting about some of the grants that we're still working on the applications for. So I'll kind of keep it short since we're going to run out of light here fairly quickly. So.
Okay, anyone have any questions? Seeing none, we'll move right into the agenda, and I would just like to say that anyone that's making a presentation, please limit your speeches to as concise as possible due to the lighting we have up here, or lack thereof. That will leave some room for discussion afterwards, or questions if we have any. So let's go on to the agenda, and the first one is a request approval for appointment to the Planning Commission, and I believe the candidate is here. The recommended motion is in the packet along with some notes. The motion is, so I think someone wants to read that motion. It's on the front page for Delilah Hall.
I move to appoint Delilah Hall
Yeah.
to the Rockingham Planning Commission for the open 3-year term ending June 30th, 2026.
So here a second.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to appoint Delilah Hall to the Rockingham Planning Commission for the term of 3 years and at the end of June 30, 2026. Delilah, do you have any comment you'd like to make, or you want to sneak out the back door and run?
Thank you very much. I'm Delilah Hall. I'm a resident of Bellows Falls, live at 49 Green Street, former zoning administrator for South Burlington until last year, and I now work for a national nonprofit based in Heartland. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Next item on the agenda is the request approval.
You know,
We're going to do a roll call thing, right?
Request approval for appointment to Rockingham Conservation Commission. In your packet, there is an application or a letter of interest from Hayden Smith. So I take a motion to appoint Hayden Smith to the Conservation Commission.
I move that we appoint Hayden Smith to the Conservation Commission.
Second?
I'll second.
Any questions further? All right, all those in favor of the motion to appoint Hayden Smith to the Conservation Commission would say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Motion carries.
Peter, I don't think we voted on the last motion.
Pardon?
We didn't vote on the last one.
Delilah's appointment. Just
Yeah, we didn't do
a
the
roll
last.
call.
I called for the skull.
What's that?
I called for it.
Yeah, but then,
Because I almost mispronounced your name.
yeah,
We never voted.
We never voted.
yeah.
Well, we'll back up and we'll vote. How's that?
That
Good.
sounds good.
All those in favor of appointing Delilah Hall to the Planning Commission for a 3-year term would say aye.
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 All those opposed, nay. Motion carries. Now you're official. You can run out now if you'd like. Next we have on the agenda is a GM request for pole agreement right-of-way permit amendment. We approved one a couple of weeks ago, and this is an extension of that permit. They're changing to some additional work out there. So I don't know if anyone's here from the power company to address that. Oh, it's right down front. Would you like to just do a quickie? We have everything
Sure.
in the packet here. So.
Sure. Franklin Austin here. We're tying 2 circuits together, the circuit out of the Westminster sub to the circuit out of Chester, and this is a continuation of the project. Since we secured the previous permit, I think it was July 18th meeting, the board approved the Muni permit. We had some additional private permits come in going up toward Pleasant Valley Road, which allows us to continue the construction under the old permit if you guys are okay with it. And what it does, it just facilitates a quicker build out for that section of line. So it would begin, the amendment begins near the post office and terminates at the intersection of Pleasant Valley and Corey Hill Road.
Okay, there's information in your packet. Any questions?
You had described taller poles that are going in Saxon's River in the village itself.
Right.
That is to accommodate.
It's current standard for the type of wire that we're using. The greater the gauge of the wire, the poles have to be more robust, so they need a bigger cylinder in the ground, taller pole, and there's a lot of communication cables running up through Saxon's River. So we need adequate spacing between the communications and the electric. So everything gets taller.
And the removal of the dead telephone poles, that is your...
That is the perennial question.
Yes.
And that is something that I really can't speak to in my capacity. I think Peter may have had a conversation with somebody at GMP leadership regarding that.
Not our,
I haven't.
I talked to last meeting, he had questions, but I think Elijah had sent an email to speak to someone, I don't know if you ever got through that or not.
Yeah, we got together on Main Street in Saxons River, but the issue boils down to communications need to transfer their cables to the new poles. Once that's complete, the old pole will come out of the ground.
Who's responsible for pulling the old pole? The communications?
GMP.
You guys. So the problem is, and that's been something you've dealt with in the past, is getting the communications, like the sidewalks on Center Street, you had to do that, right?
Right. It's a perennial problem because, as Frank had said, there's always a disconnect between the utility companies in terms of who gets there and when they've moved their wires off.
Mm-hmm.
But GMP is committed to removing the additional poles, and we'll keep an eye on it. I did talk to some of their senior engineering folks, so they're well aware of the board's concerns, and they're going to work with the utility companies to try to get them to comply. The real problem is they can't move those poles until everything's off the other, the old system. So,
So they're VTEL cables, are they?
there's not just VTEL. There's others.
Yeah, there's VTEL, there's Comcast or Xfinity, there's First Light, which is a fiber.
Right. So there's a lot of stuff going on there.
Yeah.
Which is part of the problem too. They don't all talk to each other, so they come at various points in time.
Okay.
So, but we'll keep an eye on it and try to make sure they get that done.
Thanks.
Scott, did you address the issue of pole removal with PUC or no? I know you said you're going to call them.
We talked directly to GMP and they handled it with our last couple of projects, so I'm kind of hoping that they're more responsive. So,
Hopefully, there's one out there that's been broken at Walt Keys's property for 3 years, but it's never replenished yet. It's tied to the 2 new poles which I put up with those 3 transformers on there. You probably haven't done it that way. But there's several out there that need to be taken down. Not just that one, but...
Peter.
yeah, hello.
So, yes, Franklin and I met a couple of weeks ago and we walked out the project area. And I just repeat once again my concern about the spacer cable construction on Main Street, Saxons River. It provides greater resiliency, but I believe it's an eyesore. And I think that it's a mistake to have that going down that little strip, right down Main Street. I would continue to advocate to Green Mountain Power that they compromise and consider going with the traditional 3-phase aerial cable instead of the spacer cable, just for that quarter mile right through the center of the village. It is a historic district, and the spacer cable is very intrusive. Yeah, whereas the traditional cables tend to fade away a little bit more against the sky and the trees. So even though I fully understand why they want to use the spacer cable construction through most areas because of the greater resiliency, I would urge that they stick with the traditional style just for that quarter mile right down Main Street.
So noted?
So noted. I think...
I don't know what you can reply to that.
The net effect of the spacer cable in relation to cross-arm construction is it's a more condensed area of construction. So in actuality, you're doing less work to the trees. The poles, excuse me, are taller. They're more clear of the strike zone from limbs falling from the trees. So that adds to how robust this type of construction is. It's, the cross arms on the top of the poles are approximately 6 feet. So you're taking that 6-foot zone of electric wires and you're condensing it down to about 2 feet. So it's a smaller footprint.
My argument would be just because it's on Main Street and it's pretty open through there and it's not really coming into conflict with a lot of trees. So I don't think that trimming a little bit extra on the few trees that are within the right of way is really a problem. I would just rather have the less dense wire configuration.
Is that something that's possible? I mean, I think it's possible nowadays, but I mean.
No, I know, but that would be something that you would have to take up with more senior leadership.
It doesn't
Right.
affect me. I know exactly where I go. I'm out there all the time.
Right. Well, I did meet with Amy, the chair of the village committee out there, went over it with her, so you might want to talk to Amy about it too. I don't know if you have.
Have you spoken to any of the trustees out there? See how they got any idea?
Haven't.
No, I'm just curious. I haven't either, so. Okay, we all set with this? Power?
We have to approve the amendment?
Pardon?
We have to approve the amendment?
Yeah. There's one here. There's plenty of pages here, the maps. So I'll take a motion to approve the amendment for the power company for the additional work.
So moved.
Second.
Yeah, guess that was the motion. And authorize the select board, to the chair to sign it. That's what they've got on the form here. Any further questions? Let me find the single page here. Seeing none, all those in favor of the amendment would say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Motion carries. I'll get to that. Okay, next item we want to do is appoint the Social Services Review Committee. If you remember a couple of meetings or a meeting ago, we had voted to set up a review committee for all the social services, as this year is a 5-year term that we vote on every one of them on the town hall at town meeting. So in the past, we have voted on all 20, I think there's 20 of them or so that we voted on in a combined total. So this year they all get voted individually, which could lengthen the thing. So the board decided to set up a 3-person committee to review, and we're going to send out applications that the people have to fill out and appear before this review committee, which will recommend approval, denial, or reduction accordingly with what they find in their applications. We had 3 people apply or mention they would like to do it, and the 3 are Gaetano Putagnano, Jonathan Wright, and Deb Wright. I was going to get on there myself and make the 3rd one, but I think it's best if I step back and keep my place on the select board. So I won't be causing any issues at that point. So we need a motion to appoint these 3 people if it's the desire of the board.
And the process, Peter, would be that I know we voted on this before, but they would make specific suggestions prior to town meeting that would come to us.
They come back to the select board.
Yeah.
Our plan was to do, as soon as we set up the committee, we'll notify those, if they get elected or appointed, we'll notify them that they're going to be on the committee. Scott will send out applications. I think we had, when we voted on this, there was like a 4 or 5 page application that Scott had showed us, and it's a little more detailed than what we normally had before, and it provides a little more information for them to make at least an intelligent, I hope, decision to, either approve what they got now or reduce it depending on what they find, or deny.
Okay.
But this is, the board would make this decision, not the committee.
Pardon?
The board.
Oh yeah, the board, they have to,
They're making
they will recommend what they'd
recommendations.
like to see. The caveat here is that the people, if they get denied or get reduced, they can still show up at town meeting and request an amendment and request funding. So You know, it's a shot in the dark, but we're up to 92,000 or 93,000 now in appropriations for that committee. It used to be, I know at one point it was 120,000, and we reduced it back to 70,000. Now it's starting to sneak up again. So
we'll have a chance to discuss their recommendations.
Oh yeah, it comes back to the board.
All right.
They do not make a final decision. They just make a recommendation, and then we'll make the final. Probably during the budget session, they won't make one right there at the meeting. I'd say if we get to start getting those applicants back around September, then we'll try and get 3 or 4 of those meetings scheduled in September, so we'll have time to look at them as they get into the budget.
Good. Makes sense.
So, back to the original. You need a motion for those 3.
And what's the term? I forget, what's the term?
Just a year,
Just
just
1
this
year?
year, yeah.
I move that we appoint a committee to review the social services requests, and that the 3 persons that we want on that committee are Gaetano Pucciano, Deb Wright, and Jonathan Wright.
Do we hear a second?
Second.
Motion made and seconded to appoint Gaetano Pucciano, Deb Wright, and Jonathan Wright to the Social Services Review Committee. Any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor would say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, nay. Motion carries. All right, let's go down to the request approval for amendment to closing assumption priority agreement. This is for the Bells Falls Garage project. Scott, you want to do a quickie?
Basically, the reason that we're involved in this at all is because we had pass-through funds from our CDBG funds that went into this project, and as a pass-through entity, we have to approve this final. This is basically finishing out all of their funding and their final financing on the project itself. We're under no obligation for any of the funds, as we are just literally a pass-through entity for the federal funds that were contained in this. But as an agency that did have some financial interest, we have to just approve this so they can go to closing and lock in their funding.
Okay, there is a package in your
It's a confusing document if you read
packet.
Yeah.
So, as Scott said, just a pass-through document that needs to be signed. So if we could take a motion to approve the closing assumption priority agreement and authorize the chair to sign said document.
So moved.
Give me a second.
Second.
Motion made and second to approve the first amendment to closing assumption priority agreement for the Bells Falls Garage. Any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor would say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Motion carries. Okay. Moving right along here. Next is Charlie Hunter with Red, the Opera House, Bells Falls Opera House, and suggestions of what they'd like to see go on there. There is a packet of information in your packet for the select board. So Charlie, you have the floor.
All right, well, the information in the packet is a meeting that I had with Scott and Alyssa, and I just want to say, again, working with Scott and Alyssa is great. I feel like we've got a very good relationship. We had a decent year, of course, the reality being that as the world moves to streaming, it's tough for single-screen movie theaters to prosper. That said, if you look at fiscal year 24, since July 1st, we've done almost as well as we used to do pre-COVID, but I think that had a lot to do with the movies that we had. But in going over things with Scott and Alyssa, I have some suggestions about how I think we can tighten things up in a way that should be. And do you want to get into details of this that we're working together?
Well, I think there's a couple specific things that we really want the board to be aware of that I think are somewhat important. The general consensus was that the admission prices should stay the same because that seems to be a very important community concern. We are having some issues with our concessions in terms of profitability, as Charlie took a lot of effort to break down the cost of goods sold, and the concession stand should be more of a profit-making entity than it is. So there is a set of recommendations to raise some of our concession prices.
Yeah, if you want to finish.
And then the only other one is because we invested so much more money in the facility with our new digital lighting packages and some of our other enhancements for live shows and events, Charlie felt that it would be beneficial to raise our rental rates to sort of reflect some of that investment, since now people are getting a more modern and up-to-date facility for use. So that was another specific recommendation that we wanted to bring to the board's attention that came out of this review process.
In terms of concessions, the thing I would just across the board suggest raising the concession prices by $1 on each item will still be cheaper than every other, by far, than every other movie theater in the region. I would suggest raising admission prices $1 starting next year, but not this year. And then in terms of facility rental, there are increasing numbers of outside rentals. We now have a product that is a pretty darn good, it's a really good auditorium. And with the lighting system that Scott shepherded through, with our ticketing system, there's no reason we don't have to be the redheaded stepchild in what we are charging outside presenters anymore. We have been charging $750 any night of the week, plus $1 a head, over 200 tickets sold. I would just suggest on weekend nights, the Friday, Saturday, Sunday, we raise that to $900. We're not pricing ourselves out of the market. I think we're now a pretty good entity, and I think the market will bear it.
Right.
You, on your report from July 11th, you recommended raising the entrance fee to $7, and now you say you want to reduce it to keep it at $6. Now you're even at $7, you're 30% below.
Yeah, I'm in favor of raising it to $7 starting in January of 2024. We keep it at $6 this year.
And the reason there is?
Just because rather than raising everything immediately across the board, I don't see any. Movies, we have to give up 55% of what we take in on a movie ticket. That goes to the distributors. So it's not a huge amount of money that we are sacrificing by not raising the ticket price. The concessions, cost of goods sold should be about 35%, 30%, and we're about 50 plus. And concessions, I mean, it's not like it's local food, it's not like it's healthy food. I mean, there's no real reason to keep it super cheap. So if everything goes up by $1, we're still way under what other places are charging. So I think that's a reasonable, because we still are basically a public service for movies.
True. Okay. Thanks.
All right. I'm not sure that I agree with the raising the prices of the movie prices. We're concerned with our attendance at this point, and I think we've raised them once already from 5 to 6. I know that may or may not have had an impact on the attendance, but of course with streaming going on now, you can stream the movie. The first run movie comes out just as fast as we get it in the theater. You can get it at your home.
Yeah.
If you stream it. It's about 3 weeks a month, and you can get a streamer. I'm just concerned if we raise the prices more on that end, we may lose some attendance. That's just
That's not a hill I would particularly.
I agree with you on raising the concession prices. I think that's it
So
goes. But we have.
I'm fine with just raising the concession, keeping admission as it is. I mean, the other admissions are just so it's on the record. The Latches, the adult ticket is $10. Youth senior is $8. Claremont adults are $10, youth seniors are $8. Springfield, the main theater is $8.50, no matter who, and smaller theater is $7.50. So at 6, we're safely well under all of that. So I'm fine with
I also agree with you closing the balcony too. You know, I mean, it's tough to clean up there. I think half the lights don't work anyway. You can't see what you're trying to clean from what I understand from the person that's doing the cleaning. So I don't know if the lights have been fixed or is that in the process with the lighting system we're putting in or?
Yeah, my suggestion on the balcony is closing it for movies, because we have 353 seats downstairs. We never have 353 people. For special events, I say charge an additional $100 and open it up. Because I mean, when you sell out, it's very useful, you know.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that just, I mean, because the only thing they use that for actually is when they have school kids coming in there, don't they? Last time I know, when I was driving the bus out, so we bring 3 or 4 buses in there. They used to open it up, but even then, you never really filled the bottom of the theater.
Well, for live stuff, it's needed.
So.
And Charlie, your staffing seems to be going well. People are happy. Sean Roberts is doing a good job of managing special events. So,
yeah, no, I mean, Jan and Tim overseeing the movie operation and the hiring of the day-to-day staff, and then Sean overseeing the special events. Yeah, we've got a good team.
thanks to you for taking this on, for creating RED.
Thanks. It's, well, thanks.
He's easy to work with.
Don't piss off our town manager.
We'll do our best.
He's very creative, which I'm not, so I appreciate Charlie's talents, which I have none of, believe me.
Well, you're managerial.
Now, in regards to rental for special events, do they use the downstairs? I mean, there's the green room they're supposed to use for theatrical stuff, but is the rent including the rent of that, or is that separate?
No, that's extra. It's $250 to rent the lower theater on its own. If you're renting the auditorium, then it is $125 additional to use the lower theater.
Okay, so it's not a free pass.
Oh, no.
Because I know that when some of the shows, they were using the lower theater, and
yeah, they pay
so
for it.
I don't know how that works. So someone's asking me, I said, I'll ask the question.
You can tell them that Hunter is all for maximizing the revenue streams. Sounds efficient.
The last one I'll get is using the lower theater for news. I don't know how far away you're thinking on that, but to me, the cost of getting that up, electrical and stuff, is kind of expensive, and it's a possibility we could lose that meeting room. Right now, there's no other reading room in that town hall. It's up the 3rd floor, and that's pretty small. So if we get a crowd in there, I don't know where you're gonna put them, stand them out in the hallway. We saw what the last town meeting, that was pretty well full downstairs alone. So I know we can move it back up to the auditorium, but there's problems with the sound systems and things. So hopefully that will be cured when we get done with the lighting and everything else. So.
Yep.
Yeah, I just want to have it on the table, the idea of eventually thinking of that as a second room. I think that could really help the revenue stream. Revenue stream again. I think that could really help the bottom line on the outlets. But again, it's just putting the thought out there.
And I think, Peter, the final thing for consideration is once we get our roof project finished, we'll finish with some of the plaster work. We did have some more water damage from the July storms on the upper balcony, so we did process a claim through our insurance carrier for that damage that happened after the July storms. But we're sort of stuck until we get that membrane sealed and get that drainage on the roof fixed. It's a waste of our money to try and fix all these spots, and I know that it looks like hell when you go up to that 3rd floor and you look at those pieces of plaster hanging from the ceiling, but we're sort of waiting on that, getting all of that fixed before we spend that money.
I will say, you're starting to prove me a little wrong on my first hesitancy on having Red do this thing, but I think you guys are doing a pretty good job getting things on the right track here, so.
Well, I appreciate it.
Congratulations to that.
Absolutely.
Are we all set with this? Anybody else have any other questions? Nope. Well, we'll go to the long one here. But I've been threatened to have Walter cut his legs from underneath him so he wouldn't go on too long. This is for the Rockingham Meeting House grant projects update. There is a fairly good packet in your packet for the meeting tonight, so I don't know, Walter, I see John Lutman's here also, but I guess you're the victim that's going to do the speech, so have at it.
Okay, well, it's wonderful to be in the meeting house with the town meeting. It's one of the things, with the select board meeting. It's something that whenever we have guests, for example, there's Montagna, who was our guest speaker for the pilgrimage, coming here and learning that the select board still meets here at least once a year. Folks understand that this is a very important part of the community. The update on the Save America Treasures Grant and Historic Preservation Project, we are moving along with the project information form that needs to be submitted to the National Park Service that will identify more carefully and thoughtfully the scale and the scope of the project in somewhat greater detail than what they have before them. Drawing from the historic structure report, a year ago when we were here, we were talking about do we do an engineering architectural study, find out what needs to be done to keep this place going for another 100, 200 years. We're now at a point with the historic structure report presented to the town back in May and June, taking the recommendations from that report. We've put together an approximate 3-year timeline to undertake a series of projects to keep this place going. The first year, which we're anticipating, we're presenting to the National Park Service, would begin next year. That's essentially the heavy lifting, literally, of the project, literally lifting up the building, putting in a recommended 5-foot frost wall underneath what would be the original stone foundation. While it's in the air, the windows would be out, being restored. The windows are in very, very sad shape. Most of them are original to the 1790s. There's been tremendous wear and tear on them. There are ways to restore them. They will be out, being restored while the building is up. The frost walls being put in and a better drainage system to move the water away, because one of the things that was discovered during the engineering study is that although it appears, if you look at the topsoil here, it's very sandy soil, there's actually quite a bit of clay here, and there's a lot of movement to the building because of some poor drainage. So we would be addressing the drainage issue, we would be addressing the frost movement with a much better foundation. We will also be dealing with strengthening the floor. The engineer is very concerned about the ability of the floor to maintain the kind of load for music events, for larger gatherings here of up to 150 people. So that would also be attended to during that first year. And the final piece is a foundation is very important, so is a roof. So the capstone, if you will, for the first year will be tightening up the roof, which has some minor issues. Unlike the foundation, the floor, there are some relatively minor maintenance issues that need to be attended to on the roof. The second year that we're proposing, again based on the historic structure report, is that we deal with the building envelope, both outside and inside. The outside, about 15% of the sheathing and the clapboards are in need of major restoration. There's a lot of rot. It was discovered, for example, in this corner over here, there's some significant rot that's starting to get into the corner post that's holding up the side of the building. It's something that we would be attending to. We would be attending to the post that first year, but the second year we'll be dealing with tightening up the sheathing, tightening up the clapboards, so that the outside, at the same time we'll be doing work on the inside with the plaster work. The plaster in here is pretty much the original plaster laid up in the 1790s. Over the years there have been some restoration efforts. Except for the main ceiling, many of the walls and the ceilings underneath the balcony have been tightened up, and the main ceiling has not been touched. And that's something that is of some concern. It is, like I say, the original plaster with the movement of the building. It does need some tightening up. So that second year would be more kind of the major, dealing with the building envelope, dealing both inside and outside. So that by the end of that year too, we would be dealing with some of the pew work. The pews will be very carefully cleaned, not painted, but very carefully cleaned and waxed to preserve the wood. The wood has gotten very, very, very dry. They can't, in some instances, some of the pew doors are missing because the wood is so dry, it can't hold screws anymore. And the doors come off in the user's hand. So we'll be dealing with the pews so that by the third year, we'll have a good, strong foundation. We'll have good drainage. We'll have a good, solid roof. We'll have a good sealed envelope for the building so that in that third year, building up towards the 4th of July of 2026, anticipating the celebration of the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence, that we'll be doing some of the interior touch-up work, some of the painting and cleaning up of the painted surfaces on the inside and the woodwork on the inside. So that, in a thumbnail sketch, is what has been laid out in terms of the project, again drawing from the historic structure report and to be reported to the National Park Service. Questions, thoughts?
When are they going to do jacking? I think that's going to be the most interesting aspect of the process, jacking the building up. Having had some experience jacking some buildings and things, you can do a lot of damage if you don't know what's going on.
Absolutely, absolutely. And what we're intending, in fact, we're in the process right now. This week we will be sending out a request for qualifications. We're looking for an owner's representative. We're at a point now where we need to have somebody with the professional skills to engage and work with engineers, or with an engineer to spec out the actual lifting of the building and then to hire that out.
Will Lisa Papazian help you select the vendors or the contractors?
We could approach her.
She's her work
she's an absolute, she knows so much of the building, certainly after her leadership in the historic structure report, and that's something that we will approach her and see what. I think having the Lisa Papazian, a top flight architectural historian and chair of the Preservation Trust, having her on point would be helpful.
Is now the time to talk about the finances, or is that a separate topic?
What's that?
Can we talk about the finances now, or is that a separate topic?
Well, the finances, we have at this point $720,000 bolus of money that is half from the town, half to match the $360,000 coming from the National Park Service. We also have a pledge from Bellows Falls Trades and Mike Stack of an additional $100,000. We are in the process of negotiating and seeking other pledges to continue the project over the course of the next 3 years. We know that the project, based on the estimates that were provided by the folks that did the historic structure report, this will be a $1.6 to $1.8 million project. So we do not have all the funding in place as of this moment, but that's an active process of fundraising. We're working with the newly reset Meeting House Association to help with fundraising.
And the town's $360,000, when will that portion hit our budget stuff?
Well, we've already appropriated ARPA money, as well as I think we've got some monies that are coming from some prior years, so we're fine. That's already been been accounted for in your budget. So.
Any other questions for Walter? John?
As always, Walter says things far better than I can.
Enough said. You're right. All right, we all know that one. Let's move on to the update for the community recovery and rehabilitation program for grant, Imtech Lane and Spencer Drive. It's a huge process up there.
A little history on that. We've had a series of challenges with all of that area there, which is pretty important to us in terms of our economy because of some of the larger employers that are located in our industrial park, as well as Sonex, Chroma, Whitney Blade, and they're all being impacted by these steep slope drainage issues. As you recall, we pledged money through the EWP program from USDA to help Chroma do a pretty large stormwater project, which held up very well in the July storms. I would be happy to report. So we were pleased with that. So as part of that longer-term review, we did bring in a firm to look at the entire watershed area there, to look at stormwater in a longer-term, sort of more comprehensive view, because that's a pretty large watershed that's draining through that area. And ultimately, it impacts all the way down to the railroad tracks and then obviously into the river. So it's something that we have to be sensitive to. The railroad is incredibly interested in this because they have a culvert which plugs pretty routinely at the bottom of the hill there. During the July storms 2 years ago, it washed out about 300 or 400 yards of their tracks in gravel because that culvert plugged up and they had to do some repair work. This time the culvert functioned better and they did not have damages there, but certainly that's a long-term concern. So we were working with our engineers, which the board had previously hired to do this larger stormwater plan. Betsy, thank goodness, has been working through the details of the submission, which is a fairly complex and challenging submission. It's not one of our easier grant programs. So there are 2 specific grants that she's applying for. And both of those are federal, and I think they're 80-20 breakdown. So I think, Betsy, the total that we're looking for is 2.1. Is that correct for Spencer Drive Intake?
1.982 was the number.
1.982.
1.982.
Oh, 1.982. Okay, so we back off the 2.1 and more optimistically say 1.982. And those improvements, as I said, have been identified in the larger stormwater master planning for that area. And so we're hopeful that with this submission, and we won't know anything for a period of time, but if we're successful, then I think we'll have a really good handle on designing an infrastructure there that will support all of the existing impervious surfaces, make sure all of the steep slope erosion is mitigated, as well as the drainage that ultimately goes to the bottom of the pipes and into the river is treated properly. There is bioretention, there's other green infrastructure in this entire package, so it's not just move the water faster to the river. So it's a pretty comprehensive submission, and we'll wait until we hear further about what we would do coming forward. Once, if we're successful with the grant, we'll talk about how we want to fund our portion and how that project would move forward. But at this point, we just want the board to be aware because it's a large endeavor. We've asked for letters of support from the various businesses up there, and they've all been very cooperative and spent significant amounts of their own money with stormwater improvements on their own properties, so they're tying into our larger improvements. So I appreciated all of their efforts to make this work, and Gary's been very helpful drawing them into these conversations. It's a large group of people with lots of different interests, but in the long run, it's in our best interest to keep them all here, keep the employees that they have here, and hopefully give them the ability, if they're looking, to expand, because we'll address that major concern about the long-term stormwater treatment for all of those areas and through that. So it's Spencer Drive, Imtech Lane, and Industrial. I think it's Industrial Drive are the 3 areas that we'll be specifically looking at in this round of funding.
Okay, any questions? Seeing none? Moving right along, and we'll do review and approve order bills and warrants. Can I take a motion?
Just, Peter, one question on the orders. The Kubota purchase, that you exchanged some emails with Scott about that. How the highway department bought a new tractor?
So we bought a new mower, and then we're trading in our old one. We also bought an excavator. So those are the two planned program purchases that we have in this current budget year. And by the time we get the trade-in on the old mower, we'll actually come in a little under budget for your total expenditure for this. So we're pleased with it. And it's been out in the field and working, so it's so far so good.
We have a motion to approve, review.
I move that we approve orders, bills, and warrants.
Do I hear a second?
I will second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor to review and approve orders, bills, and warrants, would say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, nay. Motion carries. Moving right along to the agenda items for September 19th meeting. There's plenty of time for that. We've got about a month, so if you have anything you'd like to get on there, let Scott or I know, and we'll do our best to get them on there.
Yeah, you'll have the meeting house use policy and update on there. Just wanted to get this to your attention this evening, so you got some of the background for it.
That will be the last of our single monthly meetings. We'll be going back to two meetings a month in October.
Yes.
Now, let's go down to review agenda items for September 26th joint board meeting.
Currently, we've got two presentations from Woodwig. I believe one is a update, I think, from Wyndham Regional on our sidewalk inventory. The other one, I think, is just a Ridwig update on, and I can't remember the topic, but they wanted to do a short presentation at your meeting on the 26th. We'll probably have a preliminary list for tax sale by then, so that we'll talk about that and how we want to move forward potentially with the tax sale, which will be in October if we decide to do it. So that'll be on there. We just started the contract with our evaluation of fire feasibility and fire services. So that kickoff meeting is Monday, and then we'll have a schedule, hopefully, with more detail that I can present to the board about when deliverables are coming and when we have a chance to get into some of the meat of that conversation. We did get additional funds from Saxon's River to help offset the study costs, and we're also asking for additional funds from BF at their meeting next week as well. So I'll update you on all that as well.
Scott, will we be interacting with the Triton?
AP Triton? Yes.
Will we have a time to kind of?
Yes.
After, what, during their research?
During the process, yes.
Okay.
During the research.
Yeah.
And then there will be public presentations and then a final report as well that will be delivered. So
Great.
There's lots of interaction with this.
Okay, other business. I have none, Rick.
The Walk Bike Committee is happy to announce that we got a $7,500 grant to paint the sidewalks from a region to Walgreens. The color remains a big issue. Red, green, purple. The state says we can't use red or green, right?
Well, you can use that horrendous screen that you saw. Remember I sent you those pictures from Deerfield? Mm-hmm. That's the approved DOT color for shared use. Okay. It's pretty awful.
Someone has suggested purple in honor of the terrier.
Oh, Lord. I'm not going there. You got it.
That's just an idea.
I just would ask that the downtown design committee gets a stab at reviewing the color choice.
Okay. And one other thing is the V-Trans is not requiring us, but it's encouraging us to relocate the walkway in front of the cars and have so the pedestrians turn left and then go along this and then come back. Our committee...
That was why that didn't get repainted in the past, from what I remember, if I remember correctly.
So, yeah, okay, so it's only a request from V-Trans. It's not a requirement. So the Walk Bike Committee will meet Thursday at 10 o'clock. Maybe you were interested in this issue and other Walk Bike meetings. You're welcome to attend.
Sue, you have anything?
Yeah, just a reminder to, so we can reach out to the railroad and see if they can do anything about the damage they've done while they've been repairing. And
I'll get a hold of A&R and we'll have to do something with the permit review because it's,
And then also, has the speed sign go up? I ask every month, but
He's had it out, but I'll make sure it comes back to Barnesville.
Well, it doesn't necessarily have to go to Barton'sville, but just make sure it gets on
Yeah.
these other roads where people complain, particularly Cambridgeport Road, there's a lot of complaints on Cambridgeport.
Okay, I'll make a point to get it on Cambridgeport.
Oh, sorry, one other thing. We had a letter from a constituent in Bartonsville who said that they're happy with the police traffic control there. They managed to nab a speeding dirt biker and some other people, and she noticed some improvement in the speeding issue. But
We get a report from the sheriff's office when they are patrolling. It's called a STAR report. And I don't have full access yet to all of July, but they were out there at least 5 different occasions during July. And they do show how many warnings they issue, how many tickets they issue. So they have been active. I think there's been some activity. for
Have
sure.
they gotten onto the other roads though? Like,
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
They've been other places too. But
and the constituent Sarah Masuko has also spoke with you about speed limit signs.
right. We talked about it. I think we both agreed that at some point signs become sort of irrelevant because you can put signs everywhere and people literally drive by and don't have any, recognition. So I think we're going to try to keep the enforcement up and see if that'll be the best.
Yeah, there's enough signs there already.
Good.
Mark, do you have anything?
Nope, I'm good.
Just a reminder that 121 will be closed starting tomorrow at 5 o'clock until 6 at night. They changed it from last week, so hopefully it won't rain and spoil their plans, but looks like it's going to be a go. So anybody planning to come into BF will have to go the roundabout way. Also, taxes are due on the 24th of August. That's next week. So just a reminder. Anything else? Hearing none, there's no need for an executive session, so I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Second? Motion is made and seconded to adjourn. All those in favor would say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. Motion carries, and we are done.
This meeting was recorded by Falls Area Community Television, located at 1 Hospital Court, Bellows Falls, Vermont. If you would like a copy of the meeting, our phone number is 802-463-1613, or email us at fact810@gmail.com. Falls Area Community TV, keeping government honest.